Who is Radagon? This is the question that stumps the ever-brilliant Goldmask in his quest to better understand the Golden Order. The answer can be found in a secret message in front of a statue of Radagon in Lendel, revealed with the incantation, the Law of Regression. The message reads, Radagon is Marika. Mystery solved. But what does it really mean that Radagon is Marika? This answer further confuses things rather than clearing them up. Was Radagon always Marika, or did he originate from somewhere else, only to later be conjoined with Marika? Why would he want to become part of Marika, or was he forced to? Why do he and Marika have apparently different motivations? Radagon and Marika are the centerpiece of the story in Elden Ring, but the story of these characters is perhaps the most opaque in the entire game. So I'd like to examine some theories about Radagon to reach a better understanding of who he might be, where he came from, and why he's here. But first, let's start with the facts, just the things that we know for sure. The first mention of Radagon in the chronology of Elden Ring is during the First Liurnian War, where his glory burned as red as his hair. Miriel tells us that Radagon was a great champion, who came to these lands at the head of a great golden host when he met Lady Rennala in battle. He then cleansed himself with celestial dew, a night tear from the Eternal City that recalls a time when the stars guided fate. Radagon repented his territorial aggressions and swore his love to Rennala, marrying her and entering the Carian line. Into this marriage, he brought his golden sewing needle and golden tailoring tools, with which he could alter demigod attire. Radagon ordered the Carian magic preceptors to don masks with the mouth sewn shut with golden thread, to make it clear that all of their matters were to be kept strictly private. Rennala bequeathed a moon greatsword to Radagon to honor long-standing Carian tradition, a sword which was later reforged to model the Elden Ring itself. Radagon and Rennala's marriage ended the Second Liurnian War, and the Order of the Erd Tree and the Fate of the Moon were conjoined. As husband to Rennala, Radagon studied sorcery. Together they had at least 3 children, Rykard, Radahn, and Ranni. However, when Godfrey, first Elden Lord, was hounded from the lands between, Radagon left Rennala to return to the Erd Tree capital and become Marika's consort, taking the title of Second Elden Lord. This union resulted in the children of Radagon and Rennala becoming demigod stepchildren to Marika. As husband to Marika, Radagon studied incantations to complement the sorceries he learned from Rennala, and thus did the hero aspire to be complete. At some point, either during his marriage to Rennala or after, Radagon gifted Rennala an amber egg which contained the great rune of unborn demigods. It's not clear how he acquired the egg or the rune to begin with. At another point, Marika spoke to Radagon in her bedchamber, saying, "O Radagon, leal hound of the Golden Order, thou art yet to become me, thou art yet to become a god. Let us be shattered, both, mine other self." At yet another point, a sculptor was summoned to the capital to render the likeness of Radagon in giant stature, but the sculptor discovered a secret about Radagon which was concealed into the statue, the secret that Radagon is Marika. In their conjoined form, Marika attempted to shatter the Elden Ring, while Radagon attempted to repair it. Ultimately, the ring was shattered, and Marika was imprisoned in the Erd Tree for her trespass. Finally, at the end of the game, a Tarnished of no renown unleashed the Flame of Ruin and the Rune of Death, burning Radagon's Seal of Thorns and gaining access to the Erd Tree's inner sanctum. Marika's fractured and lifeless body dropped from the enormous rune arc on which she was crucified, and Radagon took control of the body to fight the Tarnished. However, he was ultimately defeated, and his body was transformed into a sacred sword by the Elden Beast, the living incarnation of the concept of order, and the primal form of the Elden Ring itself. Thus ends the story of Radagon, a god who should have lived a life eternal. That's all we get for Radagon in terms of facts, But this still leaves many questions unanswered. Chief among them, where did Radagon come from? In order to answer this question, I'd like to explore and evaluate a number of theories about Radagon's origins. Let's begin with the simplest theory, that Radagon was always a part of Queen Marika. We don't know much about Marika's origins. There are several allusions to her being related or connected to the Numen, but there's nothing that says explicitly she was Numen. It's possible that she is just a uniquely strange being that is naturally divided into two people of opposite sex existing in one body. Personally, I don't find this theory very plausible. Marika's dialogue to Radagon gives the strong impression that she's speaking to someone apart from herself. She says, "Thou art yet to become me," indicating that Radagon is separate from herself at that point. There are two things which might point to Radagon always being part of Marika, or at least during his marriage to Rennala. First, Radagon gave Rennala a great rune, which would be very odd if he was just a random guy. How would he have obtained the rune? Did Marika approve of him giving the rune to Rennala? This still wouldn't be completely clear if Radagon and Marika were one person during the marriage to Rennala, but it would make a little more sense. Second, Ranni is an Empyrean, and depending on how you interpret the requirements for Empyreanhood, this could point to Ranni being somehow the offspring of Queen Marika. This only makes sense if Radagon was Marika at the time of his marriage to Rennala. Although there's no evidence for this, it's possible that Radagon was initially a part of Marika, was later separated, and then conjoined again. This is a bit convoluted, but there might be some support for this theory. In Marika's dialogue to Radagon, although she says, "Thou art yet to become me," she also calls Radagon mine other self, which could imply that they were already part of the same being, even though at the moment they're separated. This lines up with certain processes in alchemy. Solve et coagula is the name of an alchemical principle with the purpose of purifying and refining a substance. It describes a process of repeatedly dissolving and separating a substance, often into opposing pairs, and then later condensing and joining together the separated parts. This process of division and recombination is an important step in the magnum opus, a sort of recipe for creating the Philosopher's Stone. The starting matter, or the prima materia, is divided into two opposing substances, sometimes called the Red King and the White Queen, which are then conjoined. Although the magnum opus is usually thought to produce the Philosopher's Stone, some versions of it result in the production of a being called the Rebus, a complete and perfect being represented by both a male and female head attached to a single body. Thematically, this theory makes some sense given the vast associations with alchemy in Elden Ring otherwise. But there's one thing which doesn't quite fit. Radagon is only mentioned beginning in the Liurnian Wars, whereas Marika appears to have been fairly active well before then. If Radagon was part of Marika before that time, it doesn't seem likely that he would have manifested in the same way that we see at the end of the game. If Radagon originated from Marika, there has to have been some catalyzing event before the Liurnian Wars that made him manifest. The most likely candidate for such an event is the defeat of the fire giants and their fell god. One theory I've encountered in several places is the idea that when Marika defeated the fell god, she was cursed in some way, and that she somehow expunged this curse in the creation of Radagon. This is a little too speculative, even for me, as there's no mention whatsoever of Marika being cursed. However, there is one interesting thing this theory points to. The one-eyed shield depicts the face of the fell god, worshipped by the fire giants. The description says that this evil deity is believed to have been slain by Queen Marika. This line is very telling. We know that the fell god still lurks within the fire giants, and Marika should have known that as well when she left the last fire giant alive to tend the Flame of Ruin. The fact that people think Marika slew the fell god implies that there was a deliberate attempt to obscure what happened at the conclusion of the war. It could just be that Marika wanted to convince her subjects that she was powerful, but it could also indicate that there was something else about the conclusion of this battle that needed to be kept secret. Brother Corin tells us that the Golden Order is founded on the principle that Marika is the one true god, and the knowledge that Radagon is Marika is a well-kept secret, perhaps even of a blasphemous nature. It could be that these two secrets, the survival of the fell god and Radagon's existence as part of Queen Marika, are actually one and the same, and that Radagon was born or created from the result of Marika's victory over the fire giants. However, there isn't much evidence for this theory besides this very loose connection. Although I don't subscribe to that theory, Radagon appears to be connected to the fire giants in some way. So let's now examine the theory that Radagon either was a fire giant or was descended from fire giants. The description for the giant's red braid reads, "Every giant is red of hair, and Radagon was said to have despised his own red locks. Perhaps that was a curse of their kind." The final sentence is incredibly ambiguous, even among Elden Ring descriptions. Perhaps that was a curse of their kind could mean many different things. It could mean that the fire giants cursed Radagon with red hair, or it could mean that the fire giants and Radagon were both cursed with red hair, or it could mean that Radagon was just superstitious about his red hair because giants are cursed with red hair, or it could just be flowery language on the part of the description's author, and it might not indicate anything at all. However you interpret this line, the most interesting thing about this description is that it mentions Radagon at all. There's no reason to mention Radagon in an item created from the remembrance of the fire giant unless he had some connection to the fire giants. It would be weird if what the description was saying is, giants have red hair, also this incredibly important and mysterious character has red hair, but that's unrelated. FromSoft doesn't work that way. The fact that Radagon is mentioned means that he is connected to the fire giants. When we see Radagon in the final fight, he doesn't appear to be much larger than a normal human. However, we know that trolls are descended from giants, and they appear smaller than the fire giants. In addition, the Sword of Milos was fashioned from the backbone of an undersized giant, and based on the sword's size, he must have been not much bigger than a normal human. If giants are variable in size, Radagon's relatively small size might not exclude the possibility that he was a fire giant. However, size in FromSoft games is a bit flexible in general, so it might not be worth it to read too much into this question. Another thing which might support the idea of Radagon being a giant or descended from giants is the influence of Norse mythology on Elden Ring. The god Thor was a red-haired champion married to golden-haired Sif, and he wielded a hammer and the power of lightning. Although Radagon doesn't use lightning, his golden magic is visually close to lightning, so there may have been some inspiration there. Most importantly, Thor's mother was Jarth, the earth goddess, who, according to most interpretations, was a giantess. On a slight tangent, I found an interesting post on Reddit from Athena Dark, who pointed out that there are some similarities between Radagon's 3 children with Rennala and the 3 children of Loki. Loki was the son of Farbeti, meaning striker, and Laufey, meaning leaves, which has been interpreted by scholars of Norse myth to mean that Loki was born from wildfire produced by lightning striking a tree. Loki married the giantess Angrboda, and together they had 3 children, the great wolf Fenrir, the world serpent Jormungandr, and the half-dead queen of the underworld, Hel. Rykard is a giant serpent, and Rani somewhat resembles descriptions of Hel, with some versions even calling Hel half-blue. Radahn doesn't resemble a wolf, but instead a great lion. However, Fenrir was prophesied to swallow the sun during Ragnarok, which could loosely relate to Radahn holding back the stars. Incidentally, when Fenrir swallows the sun during Ragnarok, the shining god Baldur would return to life and be reunited with his brother Höður, who accidentally killed Baldur with a branch of mistletoe. all of which may have been the inspiration for Godwyn, Mikola, and the eclipse. Anyway, let's get back to Radagon. There's another theory which might explain Radagon's origins and his connection to the fire giants. Another set of beings exist with the distinctive red hair of the fire giants, the fire monks. These monks have red hair and, more importantly, pale white skin. The Radagon icon talisman depicts Radagon similarly with red hair and pale white skin. The Surge o' Flame incantation of the fire monks says that the flame of ruin was sealed and guardians were appointed to watch over it. The implication is that the fire monks were the appointed guardians referred to by the description, appointed by Marika, or at least the faction associated with the Erdtree. This means that the fire monks were at least originally people who worked for the Erdtree, monks of the Golden Order, or Proto-Golden Order, who were assigned to watch over the flame to make sure it couldn't burn the Erdtree. Only at some point they were beguiled by the flame and took to worshipping it. The red color of the fire monks' hair may be a direct result of their faith. Black flame monks who deserted the flame of ruin in favor of the black flame have black hair, implying that the change in the object of their faith resulted in a change in their own hair color. There's also the Catch Flame incantation, which is an incantation not of the fire monks or the fire giants, but rather prophets aligned with the Erdtree and the Golden Order. The description reads, "The flame of ruin is anathema to the Erdtree, but prophets sometimes glimpse it within the faith all the same. Sadly, when this occurs, their sole reward is banishment." This implies that even though burning the Erdtree is a cardinal sin, it also appears to be inevitable. The Erdtree is fated to burn. Perhaps it was even designed to be eventually burnt when the whole system was created in the first place. We know that Radagon is a Golden Order fundamentalist, maybe the Golden Order fundamentalist. Perhaps he understood this sinister prophecy of fire through his faith, and like the fire monks, was beguiled by the flame and physically changed as a result. This is all highly speculative, however. There's one major criticism of the idea that Radagon was either a fire monk or a fire giant. He doesn't appear in-game to be connected to fire in any way. He doesn't use fire incantations or magic in his boss fight, and there's no mention of him ever having done so. If he was connected to the Flame of Ruin in some important way, we would expect something that showed he had an affinity with fire. That being said, it's interesting that Radagon's thorny crosshatch pattern prevents anyone from entering the Erdtree, something which the Two Fingers didn't anticipate. Because of those thorns, the only way to enter is to burn the Erdtree. This could imply that Radagon put the thorns there precisely because he wanted the Erdtree to burn. Denying access to the Erdtree's inner sanctum would eventually force someone to make this sinister prophecy come true. On a somewhat unrelated note, there is another creature which has red hair, the red-haired Leonine Misbegotten warriors. A Leonine Misbegotten in the Cave of the Forlorn in the consecrated snowfield carries the Golden Order greatsword which was bequeathed to Radagon. This is very strange. I've also been told that these Misbegotten are referred to as Radagon's children in the game files, although I haven't yet been able to check this out for myself. What does that mean? I have no idea. Clearly there's some connection between the Misbegotten, and thus the Crucible, and Radagon, and red hair, and perhaps beasts and Radagon's red wolves, but there just isn't enough there for me to come up with a strong theory about it. Let's take a look at another theory about Radagon's origins. What if Radagon was a homunculus? An artificially created life form, like the Albinaurics or possibly the Mimic Tears. We know that the Nox attempted to create a Lord of Night using the Mimic Tears. We also know that the Numen and the Nox are closely connected, and that Marika is either a Numen herself or closely connected to them. It's possible that Marika succeeded where the Nox failed, and that Radagon was created to be her lord. Perhaps she succeeded because Radagon was made from gold rather than silver. This is all just speculation, but there are a couple things that might support this idea. The The Mimic Veil is an item found in Stormveil that allows the player to imitate the form of nearby objects. It's a golden veil of intricate design that's also known as Marika's Mischief. This suggests that Marika was versed in a similar kind of imitative magic that the Mimic Tears use, only hers is a gold-based version. There's potentially a reason why a gold version of the Mimic Tear could create a lord, where a silver-based version didn't. The Silver Scarab and Silver Pickled Fowl Feet increase item discovery, whereas the gold versions increase the number of runes absorbed from enemies. Items are inanimate, just dead objects, but runes are more connected with living things, given that you absorb them from killing enemies. In my view, runes and grace seem to be in some way the essence or souls of people who died while connected to the Erd Tree. Ordovis's greatsword says that primordial gold has a red tint, and that it's close in nature to life itself, further supporting the idea that gold has a kind of vitality that silver might lack. This red tint of primordial gold could also explain why Radagon has red hair. There's another thing which might support the idea of Radagon as a homunculus, and that's the cut Asimi questline. Asimi was a silver tear that you would take into your own body, acting as a host. Asimi's desire was to become a lord, what she refers to as a sovereign eternal. Asimi's existence inside your body doesn't appear to be exactly like Radagon's existence inside Marika, but there's definitely a parallel between the two. This content was cut for a reason, however, so maybe it's best not to draw too many conclusions from it. Finally, there is the fact that Radagon cleansed himself with celestial dew, also known as a night tear, when he married Rennala. It's very strange that Radagon would have to undergo some special Nox ritual in order to commence with this marriage. Maybe this celestial dew, which recalls a time when the stars guided fate, somehow interfaced with his homunculus form to imbue him with some starry essence that allowed his fate and Rennala's to be intertwined. It's also interesting to note that Radagon learned sorceries from Rennala and incantations from Marika. It's almost as if he was absorbing or imitating aspects of his consort. All of these different theories have positives and negatives to them. Let's quickly summarize what we've covered. There are essentially 4 possibilities. 1. Radagon was always Marika, and Marika was always Radagon. In other words, the rebus being that we encounter at the end of the game always existed in its current state, where each person manifests alternately to the other. This seems unlikely because Radagon doesn't come into play until the Liurnian Wars, whereas Marika seems to have been active for a long time before that. 2. Radagon was in some way extracted from Marika. This might make sense on a thematic level, considering the connections to alchemy, but there isn't a lot of evidence in-game to support this idea. 3. Radagon was a fire monk, a fire giant, or a relative of the fire giants who conjoined with Marika at some point. There are reasons to think that point could be either before Radagon's marriage to Rennala or afterwards, but the lack of any connection between Radagon and fire makes all of these theories a little suspect. And finally, 4. Radagon was a homunculus created by Queen Marika to become her lord. This theory has even less evidence to support it, but it could explain a lot, and it would fit nicely with some of the other stories in-game. Ultimately, I'm not 100% convinced by any of these theories, so I'm going to throw one more, even crazier theory out there. For some time, I've been scratching my head as to who this bald guy is. His statue appears prominently in Roundtable Hold and throughout Lindell, as well as the inner keep and throne room of Stormveil, and it's also repeatedly placed in the middle of the Bellum Highway, leading to the Grand Lift of Dectus and continuing on to the capital. Some statues, reliefs, and paintings in FromSoft games are just generic designs meant to fill in the world. They may not have much meaning behind them. But this statue is so unique and in such prominent locations that I don't think that can be the case. When Lindell, the Bellum Highway, and Stormveil were built, this bald man must have been a recognized figure, very important to the faction aligned with the Erd Tree. His face also appears to be the same as the giant smoldering heads from the network test that were eventually cut. In every version of this statue, he is holding a branch or root of a flowering tree, which is in different stages of growth depending on the location. More importantly, the Bellum Highway version makes it appear as if he's actually emerging from the tree. If we look at the statue of Radagon in Renala's library, he too appears to be emerging from a tree. The Radagon icon also depicts the red-haired Radagon emerging from flowering branches. It would be a bit of a reach to say that this bald guy is Radagon. One of the things we know for sure about Radagon is that he had flowing red locks. Almost every mention of Radagon in-game also mentions his red hair. But maybe the fact that so much attention is drawn to his hair is a subtle clue that he didn't always have it. I'm reaching a lot here, but maybe the Bold Monk is a depiction of Radagon before he metamorphosed into the Radagon that we know. I don't really believe this idea. The only thing that makes me think this is even a possibility is Miquella. Miquella's alter ego of Saint Trina is a sort of mirror image to Marika's alter ego of Radagon. If Miquella was using rot to grow or transform into Saint Trina, maybe Marika used some kind of Erd tree related vegetation to grow or transform into Radagon. The flowers on the Bald Monk statue at Bellum Highway somewhat resemble the flowers in the Swamp of Ionia, although in the Round Table Hold, the flowers are gold-colored. Maybe the rot and the Erd tree are connected in some way. I'm partial to the theory that Zyostorm recently suggested, that the Erd tree is actually a kind of giant mushroom. Like the rot, and like fungus in real life, the Erd tree appears to be sustained by the death or decay of organic beings. Only the Erd tree feeds off the spirit or essence of the dead, rather than their physical body. This theory is a bit crazy, I'm aware of that. I'm just very confused and intrigued by this Bald Monk, so I'd love to hear your theories about who he might be. I'd also love to hear your thoughts about Radagon and what I've covered in this video. I think I've been pretty thorough, but I'm sure there's many other, more imaginative theories that I hadn't considered. Maybe some of you can make more sense of Radagon than I can. I'm gonna finish with a quick update on this channel, so if you're not interested in that, thanks for watching, and I hope you join in next time. For the rest of you, there's a couple things I'm planning. I've got another lore video planned, but I'm also working on a different type of video, which will be a fair and honest critique of Elden Ring. There are some critiques out there already, but a lot of the criticism I've seen is muddled or misguided in my view. And I think because Elden Ring is a great game, it deserves a very carefully thought out critique. I'll be including everything from combat to level design to music, but I'd be really interested in hearing from you guys as to what you think the major issues in Elden Ring are. You're welcome to leave comments on this video, but if you have something longer to say, I'd recommend messaging me on Twitter or Discord, which you can find in the description. Beyond that, I'm not sure what I'll do next with this channel. I can feel myself getting a little bit burnt out on Elden Ring lore, as I've thought about almost nothing else since it released. So I might make a couple videos on other games in addition to covering Elden Ring, but I'll cross that bridge when I come to it. A couple people asked me about a Patreon, which I hadn't really thought about. I may create one, but I want to make sure that it's worthwhile for you guys, so I'll have to think about what I could put up there that would be interesting. I really appreciate you guys and your support, and your excellent comments. Please keep them coming. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you next time.